We are back, Ep.6 of the Anabolic Mafia with IFB before Chris Mazzar and myself. And we have our first guest here with us on the show, a bodybuilding coaching legend, coach to Ronnie Coleman, Mike Tyson, Big Ramy, his wife Kim Chavensky, Linda Murray, Nashville Somebody, Tom Prince, Chris Cormier, Victor Martinez, Flex Wheeler, and many more. More than 20 total Olympia titles. It was 23, 24. It's more than 20. And a never-ending list of championship titles. And he's the man who coached me when I turned pro, the diet doc, Chad Nicholls. What's going on, Chad?
Hey, man, I appreciate you guys having me on, and definitely appreciate being the first guest. So I appreciate it. All is good.
Everything's looking forward to this, man.
Yeah. I don't know. I mean, I don't know if you guys have knew. Last 4 or 5 years have been a little sketchy for me because I've been up and down health wise, like just weird fluke stuff. I got bit by a brown recluse spider, which is they're everywhere here in Missouri, and didn't think anything about it. And anyway, just to kind of go over that fast, I ended up with MRSA. That settled on my spine, built a rind over it. I had it for over a year. Went back and forth through stuff, didn't know really what it was, blew it apart with a Theragun into my system, and then went septic. But I had the infection for over a year. And so my body had kind of gotten used to surviving on it until I blew it apart. And then I ended up with like infection masses in 5 different places, back of my head, neck, throat, chest, and they had to all be drained. And so I was literally dead when they took me to the hospital because I'm like most people, I hate to go to the doctor. I put everything off. I'm like, I can get through this. I can get through this until it just smashed me. And so that was kind of one of the things that I went through. Ended up being septic 4 times in 3 years. So I was in the hospital 4 times with it. Couldn't get it under control because we couldn't figure out where it was. So we knew it was on my spine. It had covered T1, 2, and 3. So it had eroded the spine away. And so I have open, what they call open firing nerves. So it's all opened up. It eroded it. So the pain was like excruciating. Had to go through that. That created AFib. So then I had AFib for basically over a year. Didn't think it was AFib, thought it was anxiety because I would go through these weird things and they had thought I had PTSD from the sepsis, which is pretty common, I guess. And then ended up having a massive stroke 2 years ago. So a lot of people didn't know that. So I had a massive stroke 2 years ago, came through that, and pretty lucky, had no cognitive issues. No paralysis, no nothing. But it like smashed the shit out of me for a while. And so it was at that point I kind of reevaluated a lot of stuff, kind of simplified my life, eliminated stuff that was, stressing me out and those types of things like promotional stuff. We promoted up to 6 shows a year sometimes. And with the state of the sport and everything, we just had to eliminate that completely out of our lives. Just focus more on family. I got 2 boys that are driving me crazy most of the time, but that was the, priority and family and then, nutrition and helping athletes and stuff like that. So that's really my nutshell in the last few years. So
you've been through it to say the least.
Yeah, it was crazy.
Since the last year, are you pretty much in the clear from all those issues? How's your health now?
Yeah. So actually I went to the doctor yesterday, had blood ran. They did a lot of different tests and it was actually kind of shocking. I actually got to go for my update, my MRI. They'll check my brain and all of that kind of stuff. But my blood work actually came back perfect. Like I was actually a little bit shocked. Blood pressure was actually, to me, on the low end, 104/74, which is almost as good as it's been. I can't remember when. My weight's down because I started eating a little bit better. Liver enzymes, kidney, everything, creatinine, all perfect. A little bit of issues with some blood, but nothing major, not way out of range, all within range, but kind of on the high side of normal. So yeah, knock on wood, everything is pretty good for now.
So did that stuff stem from the brown recluse bite and then just got worse?
Yeah, it all, was from that. I ended up with the infection, and it basically what had happened. The first one was in the spine. Second one we think was in the spine. The third one they think I have arthritis in my shoulders, and I had never even heard of this before. But I guess sepsis will settle on arthritis, and so my shoulder was called septic arthritis, and so the infection had actually settled in the joint. And so that was obviously an issue. So they ended up cutting me open, rinsing all of that out, draining all of that, and kind of going through that. And that was about the point we got everything under control, we thought, with the infection, never dreaming that I was going to end up with any issues like a stroke or anything. That was the least of my worries. And then that was, kind of hit me. And I mean, that really kind of changed the way I thought. Like, honestly, the stroke, when I came out of that, I don't know if it was a stroke or just going through it, but my whole thinking process was different at that point, I think. Like, just what was important and, stuff. And even the way I approach bodybuilding and stuff is a little bit different, I think. So,
Chad, would you mind touching on that briefly? Like, what did change, like your perspective on life, and even touch on how you approach bodybuilding? Like, I would love to go a little bit deeper in that if you don't mind.
well, here's the thing. I mean, we all kind of get into this with the understanding of what's going on. We know the game that we're playing. Everybody tries to they try to push things as far as they can to be as proactive as they can. And I was no different, even for myself. I was somebody that pushed the boundaries of what I thought I could get away with. I was, I never was extreme, even though people probably think that because I have all the shit they hear. But I never was. I was always middle of the road. I would walk a fine line, but I wasn't willing to, push things ridiculous. I was big on food, which that, Dom. Like, I think food is the key. I'm a big believer in that. But even with that, my thinking process became, to a point where I didn't go to excess and just like, let's throw more fuel on the fire and we'll cover all the bases. It was, how efficient can we become and be as minimal and as little as we possibly can, but still accomplish what we need to. And in today's era, that is really tough to do because I mean, we're at the extreme level at this point in bodybuilding. Bodybuilding has leveled up and leveled up and leveled up. And so I think, I'm picky and choosy where before I probably wasn't. And now I am. I mean, well, I was always pretty picky about who I worked with and stuff. I had to click with the person and stuff. But now, like if somebody comes to me and they send me a list of what they've done and what they've done over the years, and I see things that, I'm just like, no way. I don't even go down that road. I don't put myself in that situation, just for the simple fact. But I'm also a lot more open about, listen, there's only so much that this sport is worth. It's not worth your life. It's not worth, health issues down the road. I think we all understand the game and we all know that we're going to risk a little bit. But I still think that fine line has always been there. And now it's back farther, I think, for me.
What were some red flags that you might see when people would bring up stuff that they've done and everything? Like, what was like a big red flag for you?
I'll tell you the biggest flag right now to me. So I remember back in the day, I mean, there was guys that was probably taking growth, and like the high side of growth was these guys that would maybe sometimes run 18 IU because that was a full bottle right from the Cerestim. So they would they would be like, I pushed it up to 18, right? To me, I mean, that's a lot. Like, that's a shit ton of growth. Now they're doubling that. Like, I've had 3 guys this month, ironically, all from Germany, all doing 36 IU. All of them, all 3 doing 36 IU. I'd never even seen that before. I'd never seen anyone do that much before. And this month, I've had 3 guys contacting me that were all doing that. Now, I don't know if that's coming from something in that demographic. If maybe somebody's being fed that type of information over there. But I mean, there's just a lot of red flags. People that have not had blood work done ever, or maybe not for the last 2 or 3 years, no chance am I going down that road. And again, I get that kind of, some of these guys are young and they're under the impression like, I don't even want to know. And I'm not really want to talk because I did the same thing when I was sick. I didn't want to go to the doctor. I pushed it. I put it off. I put it off. Even when I, was septic, I literally laid in bed thinking to myself, I can get through this. I can make it through this. And I literally got to the point where I was seeing shit. Like I was seeing hot dogs and shit on the ceiling and like just weird shit. And finally, yes, and finally my son came in and said, I'm calling an ambulance. And that's what happened. We called an ambulance and I was in the hospital, about 20 minutes later. And they literally were like, yeah, you're like on the verge of death. I remember the one thing I will never forget is the first time I went in and I was septic, they drained 12 pounds of infection out of me from the spots that they drained, 12 pounds. And I remember the nurse's assistant talking to the nurse and say, or the doctor, and be like, well, how is he still alive? And the doctor's like, yeah, that's what we're trying to figure out. This is the highest level of infection we've ever seen in a living person. And afterwards, I asked the doctor about it, and she said the only thing we can think of is that you had it for so long that your body just got accustomed to it and figured out a way to kind of survive with it. And then when you busted it all loose, it was just too much to handle. And so, she was like, probably 30 minutes, an hour more, and you'd have been never made it here probably. So, but I think like back is like I'm lucky, but then at the same time, I think these people like, how the hell could you not get your blood run? And then I think back, I did the same thing. I literally did it. I did the same thing. I didn't go to the doctor. I knew I was sick. So I think those guys just get to a point where they don't want to go. They just say, forget it. I don't want to know. I'm going to do this anyway. So screw it. I'm just not going to go. And to me, maybe 20 years ago, I might have taken that guy on with the understanding that, oh, I can fix this guy. I can help this guy. And now, no chance. I go to the doctor, get your blood work, and then recontact me or whatever. And I never person again, so somebody will take him.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, Chad, just to kind of circle back to something you said in the beginning, you said that today's level of bodybuilding is up to extremes. I mean, the physiques are, I mean, compared to even a few years ago, the past few years, bodybuilding has definitely advanced, if we want to use it,
Sure.
at the Olympia stage. Now, a common argument is that 90s bodybuilding was better than today's bodybuilding, right? Which I think we can look at both sides of it and agree and find reasons to disagree with the level of drug use that's going on, right? And you're now seeing it first. You've seen everything since the beginning.
I've seen it across the board from moderate to low to high, and even points where I thought was high. And I mean, I remember thinking 10 years ago, like, man, we're maxed out. Like, we're never going to go beyond this. I mean, there's always guys and you always hear stories, but now the norm is high. Like, I mean, it's through the roof now. And I think that, it's just going to kind of keep getting worse with the social media because you see all of these young kids and all of this stuff and you see the level of recognition they're getting and all of the I guess sponsors and contracts they're getting with these things and it's just I think the kids are just willing to do it. They're just willing to do whatever. Social media has pushed it that direction a little bit and it's also helped because it's brought awareness. It's brought a level of knowledge to the people that want it, but then it's brought a level of recklessness to also the kids that want it. So it's it's a thing. 90s bodybuilding, in my opinion, is the best era we've had. Not for the simple fact that bodies were just great. They were great. Don't get me wrong. But the depth of the athletes at that level was amazing. Now, granted, we didn't have men's physique and classic physique and all of that, which is where the majority of the structural great athletes end up now because they're looking for something very quick. And so I think a lot of it is based on before you only had one path. It was bodybuilding, basically. Those guys, it took, I remember, seeing Flex Wheeler, and I mean, it took him several years to get there, But when he got there, he went right to the Ironman and Arnold and just dominated. And that you don't really see anymore. You don't see it because guys are going to a show, the very first show, they're not even knowledgeable in the sport. They don't understand the sport really, yet they've got a pro card. And they don't understand the history of the sport, the people that were there first, who's kind of built that for them. It's just boom. And I think that's, in my opinion, what has kind of brought the level of up and down, and people, always kind of looking at the 90s versus today. We got some great athletes today, but we've got some bad athletes right now too that are doing well, that people are just scratching their head like, how is this possible? And yet, they're constantly hearing, oh, they couldn't have placed in the top 10, back then, and all of this. That's hard to say, because you look at these guys, they're all phenomenal athletes, at every level. But there's always going to be somebody that's good and somebody that's bad. There's going to be preferences. We've seen a push this, towards smaller, shorter guys. And so those guys are very limited on that long, length, muscle, and, that kind of statuous, look, kind of an eye appealing look. The taller guys have. I looked at Andrew Jack at this, year's Olympia, and I was like, fuck, that guy is just like a Greek god. Like, his physique is just unbelievable. And it doesn't matter who's the best up there, you're just drawn to him. Like, that's the guy you're drawn to, because everybody looks at that physique and is like, that's what we're looking for as a Mr. Olympia. Somebody that, when you saw Ronnie, didn't matter when, the off season, on stage, you just looked at him. Hell, I'd seen him, day in and day out. And I would walk into the room and look at him and just like shake my head like, it's just like unbelievable. And I mean, I remember, seeing athletes like Chris Cormier and thinking like, oh man, Chris Cormier is so good. And then I would go to maybe Flex Wheeler's room and think, oh shit, like Flex Wheeler is just ungodly. And then you would walk to Ronnie's room and you're like, oh shit, this is just a different level of person. And I remember just like looking at him, shaking my head, like thinking like, will we ever see anything like this again, just based off of the muscle, the way it hung off of his back, and just the depth and thickness of it. So yeah, but I mean, and you look at guys, like Nick Walker. I think Nick Walker, the way he trains, the way he approaches, bodybuilding, you don't have to like his physique. I don't necessarily think he's got the perfect, physique, but he bodybuilds very much 90s. He lives bodybuilding. Everything he does is structured around bodybuilding. You don't see that very often. I mean, like every single thing, you just don't see it very often.
Chad, on that, so you just answered a bunch of questions. Of course, you drew it out. This is why I love talking to you. While we're on the subject of current athletes, there is, a lot of drama surrounding Nick's placing and his coaching and everything like that, as there is with everything in this industry. It's turned into a big soap opera. From a coaching standpoint, and from you, again, seeing everything since for the longest time, off the top of your head, what are some of the few things that stand out with Nick? Again, I know you don't know the intricacies of what he does, but what are some of the things off the top of your head that you would change or recommend to do differently for him to improve to, be in that front running position again?
Well, I think, with Nick, I mean, it's one of those things where, I mean, he's a guy that you don't have to really second guess. Like, at least my thinking, and based off what I've seen, my oldest son, I don't know if he talks to him so much now, but they used to kind of talk some. And so I just know he is a very regimented guy. Everything I've seen from him, very regimented. So, when you look at things with Nick, I think you almost got to simplify shit, because I think he's very in tune with his body. One, you're going to have to find a coach that can listen to him, that can take his feedback and basically utilize that, but then at the same time adapt to it. So I think what a lot of people do, they come in, they think, oh, this is the problem, I'm going to fix that, and I'm going to adapt him to my way of thinking. Worst possible thing you could do, because every single guy is different. So it's going to take a guy, because again, Nick knows what works for him. And so if you start doing things, and again, I have no idea what he's doing, but I know the type of athlete he is, you're going to have to be able to adapt to him. You're going to have to be able to take his feedback well. You're going to have to be able to, utilize that and then simplify it and just go. And I mean, I mean, he's an athlete that should realistically, unless his physique, I mean, granted, could be, should be realistically pretty straightforward, because I don't think now, if you tell him something he knows doesn't work for him, again, this is where the athlete's going to have to really be able to communicate well. Here's my thing too. The one thing I've noticed with him is he becomes really close friends with a lot of his coaches. And I think that's really good and bad at the same time, because when you do that and you become very, very close to the athlete, I think everybody in a working relationship like that becomes very close. But there has to be a point where you are not afraid to make the guy suffer. And I mean, down deep, you may not think you are, but you're backing off. Like, that's the worst case scenario, I think, right now for Samson, because I don't care what his wife does. She's never going to push that guy to a point where he's suffering and, she feels sorry for him. Like, it's never going to happen. She may think she can, but she won't be able to. It will take somebody. And again, like, I'll answer this one with Samson. I know you didn't ask it, but along the lines with, Nick, Samson's going to have to find somebody that can, one, fix all of his problems in the off season, because they're trying to fix those problems at the show. Never happen. And they're going to have to find somebody that works with him in conjunction with the wife. And when those two things, when he finds somebody like that can, kind of coexist in a team, they'll be perfect. That'll be a good, setup for them. That's why I kind of thought, like, even when he was with Milos, I thought it was a pretty good working dynamic. But again, they weren't able to get that, that skin thin and all of that. And those are things you can't fix at the show. That is, as well as I do. That has to be done in the off season. That shit all has to be, in play going into, the show in the off season and stuff. So I think all of those guys, but Nick, I know a lot of guys love him. They hate him, this and that, blah, blah, blah. He's one of the best in the world. I don't think you can outwork that guy. Does he have the perfect physique? No, but neither did Jay Cutler, and he beat Ronnie Coleman eventually. I think it's just with Nick finding something that's an in-between balance. I don't necessarily think they should ever try to dwindle his waist down, because they're not going to do it. You can't bring his waist in, small. You can bring it in flat. You can bring it in tight. You can bring it in controlled. But there also has to be a balance of size, which makes him kind of overpower the midsection a little bit and find that balance. That would be my thinking with Nick. Come in big and hard. That's what you are, playing up to. But at the same time, find a happy medium that is going to allow that midsection to not get out of control during transitions and stuff like that.
I think what you said before too about Nick was, like, find someone who's not going to be like against him because he knows what he likes. And from other interviews that I was watching, it seemed like, everyone's like, why the hell would you leave your coach? But he said that they just didn't meet eye to eye on like a handful of things that he just didn't like or hated. Ended up, having to go against the plan a few times. And like, you can't have that lack of communication, lack of trust.
And here's the thing. I mean, honestly, as a coach, and Dom, this too. When you get an athlete, especially like Nick, the person that knows his body the best is him. Like, he's going to tell you. Now, you can't listen to all the stuff, because there's going to be a point where he's going to be like, hey, I think I need more carbs. Well, yeah, I bet you do think that. But you know what I'm saying? Like, you've got to be able to listen to him and understand what he's doing. And when you find that coach, then everything just kind of falls in place. It's not anything that you are really having to work hard to, kind of come together. It just falls in place.
I just want to go back a little bit to something you said, kind of pivot a little bit. You said, like, with somebody like Samson, with the thick skin, guys like that, the work is done in the off season, you said. You don't really hear anybody talk about that or even think about that.
Sure.
If you could go deeper into that, what do you mean by the work is done in the off season for issues like that?
We're just knocking out these questions, by the way, because we're already answering ones that are on our list.
It's great.
Yeah. So here's the thing about that. So most people look at Samson and they're going to see him, whatever, and they're going to think he's out of shape. They're going to be like, oh, he's out of shape and stuff. What they're probably doing is they're looking at key body parts that are genetic and thin-skinned in certain areas. So if you notice him in the off season, he can flex those quads out and they'll cross-stripe pretty much, but not everything will. And you can tell that skin is thick. So the key would be, obviously figuring out what is creating that, what is inducing. Most of the time, and I'll use some examples, like Melvin Anthony, for instance, he had a very, very similar situation. He was a situation that spiked estrogen levels. His estrogen level wasn't necessarily high all the time, but it spiked high. And so we had to kind of play around what was doing that and what was inducing water into the skin. So those are some things that we had to do with Melvin. Now, I don't know for sure, what Samson is doing because I don't know what he's doing, but something he's doing is keeping that skin very thick. And again, it could be a handful of things. In the long run, it's probably going to be a great thing because those are things you want as you get older, that, thicker skin and stuff. And a perfect example is when you see old people that, their growth hormone level has literally just plummeted to nothing. And that skin is almost transparent. It looks like paper. You know why that is and stuff. And that's not a perfect scenario for that. But again, like there could be so many factors that do that. But his has got to be genetic. Again, like Melvin's was, Kamali had that situation a little bit. Hassan Mustafa had a little bit of an issue and some stuff we had to figure out. His was actually pretty interesting because if you notice him, he was cycling. And so his body at one point was very, very low in estrogen. Perfect. We had it under control. It was just at a nice level that the body was very, very balanced out, running very optimal. Then, boom, it just went through the roof. And it happened right before the Olympia. And so we started fighting this. We couldn't really get the body to do anything. We managed to kind of get it there, but nothing close to what he looked like at the first, 3 shows of the year. I went back after that show and looked at pictures. He's been like that for 3 or 4 years. So whatever it is he's doing as the year, goes on, he just gradually does. Now that could be something he's doing. That could be just it could be 100 different things, but something he's doing is allowing that to do it. And if you notice, he did the same thing this year. Like as he went on, he just kept getting worse and worse and worse. And was one of those things where, you can smash down on whatever you want to smash down on. It ain't going to fix that problem.
That's actually a really good point because I trained around Hassan when I was trying to make a comeback. He was in Vegas for a while training with
Right, I
Sweats.
remember that. I thought you were training him at one point.
No, a lot of people thought that.
Yeah, I think it was EJ that time or whatever.
No. When he was in Vegas, at that point he was with Aceto.
Oh, okay.
And I remember. Yeah, and I remember seeing him in the gym, and people would attack him and say, "Oh, he's cheating on his diet. He's not doing cardio." That man was doing 3 hours of cardio a day, training twice a day sometimes. And I know he didn't cheat on his diet, but he just had that look to the skin just progressively got worse and worse and worse. So it's funny to hear you point that out and just say it. You guys have worked together, but I saw it firsthand.
Yeah, it was crazy because we had, I knew that was going to be an issue. And we had gotten his blood work and we were following it very, very close because he had some numbers that I wanted to make sure was in line and stuff. And the estrogen was literally perfect. And by the time, about 3 months, by the time we got to the Olympia, it was so high, like over 3,000 high. And there was just no controlling it. It was, you couldn't control it. And again, he was doing more cardio than I wanted him to do. Like it was just through the roof. And it wasn't that he was doing anything that would justify it to be that high. It wasn't taking anything that would make it that high, wasn't doing anything that would do it. So it's just his body's makeup of how it responds on certain compounds that's just skyrocketing it, just through the roof.
Do you think there's an issue with that kind of stuff nowadays with people getting the wrong kind of gear and stuff? Or
100%. I think a lot of people with that normally, and this is one of the things I look at right off the bat. A lot of times I think because, the stuff is really hard to come by now, and legitimate stuff and everything. And so the one thing I've seen a lot of stuff, and we'll go and have athletes tested, and it's almost to the point where where I can look at these guys and be like, okay, wait a minute, something's definitely off. And you go and test their testosterone level, and it's literally through the roof. And so you know that there's probably 2 compounds in there that is supposed to be something else that is now testosterone or something, or something else, and it's just blowing through the roof. So I think that's definitely an issue, and I think in those cases people don't even know it. Again, why it's so important to get blood work done and keep an eye on that. And with me, like I tell everybody now, the blood tests are so cheap now. Like they are so cheap. There's no reason anybody shouldn't do it. I mean, you can have almost a full panel done that would normally run you $500. Most of these wellness clinics have a deal set up to where they can test all that for like $125. So you can go in and have specific tests done for nothing pretty much. And it's just not worth doing. And I mean, the guys that really care will do that. And they'll go in. I've had a lot of athletes that had their blood tested, every month, every 2 months to keep track of where those things are. And those are the athletes that can really fine tune things and really keep an eye on things, and just being proactive. I mean, it makes a big difference, especially in this day and age. I mean, it's you look at the internet and it's a different one every single fucking day. Like this guy died and this guy died. And it's women now. Like when the women started going and all this kind of stuff, I mean, no telling why. I mean, we know that there's just, some of the factors that these people are doing are putting things at risk, but it's definitely way beyond where it's ever been before, I think. And again, like, I think it's combinations of excessive use because of social media and just not the same quality and availability to because like when I grew up and when I was getting really first into it, I mean everything came out of an American pharmacy. I mean pretty much everything. Friggin' American Anadrol and suspension and like literally everything. I mean, it was just a point where, and I remember, when I was younger taking stuff, I took Anadrol and my appetite skyrocketed. Like I could not eat enough. You can't find anybody that's taking Anadrol right now.
That's how I was. I had the American Alavan ones in the red bottle. I had them for a few, and
yes.
it did not kill my appetite.
Oh,
And there was a certain look to me and a certain feeling. And I remember it's funny when I had them and I first started. My dad would know when I would take them, but then I remember when I go back on, my dad would look at me. He goes, "You're taking that Anadrol again, right?" I'm like, it had a certain look and a certain feel to it that no other underground lab I don't care what is, didn't even touch it. So it's good to hear this firsthand from you. Now, I have a question that ties into this that me and Chris spoke about, I believe it was last episode, and people have been kind of been arguing about this for like the last few years. Is generic growth hormone the same as pharmaceutical growth hormone with that cosmetic look that we look for on stage to you?
No, it's absolutely not the same. And I'll tell you, I know that for a fact because I knew where a lot of that generic stuff was coming from, and it was garbage. It was literally, it was HCG. Like it wasn't even fucking real. And I know there was blue tops and green tops. Those were all fake. That's what this person was doing. And it was all fake. And I mean, when you compare that to, now don't get me wrong, I've seen some China growth that's come out of there that's been very pure, levels tested through the roof. And you can tell it instantly. There's a big difference in that. But I mean, there's also a big difference in most of the generic growth and, like the pins and the seristems and all of that. There's a massive difference in that. And so it's one of those things I think where I tell, most of my guys, if they've got both, mixed it, like use a little bit of one and a little bit of the other, versus trying to, save the real shit for, at the end or whatever. I think that if you know that the China stuff is real, I think that's the key, because I think most of it out there isn't real. I don't think it's real. I think it's obvious when you see the people that are using it. Because I mean, just like both you guys, when you're on real growth, it's a different look. I mean, there is it's different. The way you feel is different. Like you can't even brush your teeth without, friggin' like your hand falling asleep and shit. So it's different, I think that, I've told people this, I would rather use some of the peptides like the CJC and the IP Morelands, Frag, like some of that stuff than some of the cheap stuff in high dose. You know what I mean? Like, I think that I've seen some guys get phenomenal, progress off of just that, especially at a starting point. I think is, a positive. So I think that, the peptides are, I think a lot of the peptides are good. I think a lot of them are just, but I think a lot of them are really good. So, and I mean, I'll tell you the one thing, this is going to be kind of interesting. So if you think about the one peptide that was all being talked about coming into this Olympia, and I don't know this, I'm just putting this together from, okay, retatrutide. So retatrutide was literally just talked about and talked about and talked about. And I agree. I think it is a phenomenal product. I've just recently tried it just to see how it would, do and stuff. Because again, I'm not going to tell anybody, to take something unless I know exactly what it's doing. But the one thing, and I think that there is some amazing positives on the retatrutide. However, the one thing that it still does is it slows the emptying process of the stomach. Anybody that knows that can create a lot of problems, inflammation, like all of these types of problems, which is going to create distress in the stomach. And if you look at the one thing that was kind of standing out in a lot of people's minds at this Olympia was stomachs. Even guys who never had issues with their stomach, like Keon and some of these guys, had just a little bit of irregularity to the stomach. And you wonder if maybe the retatrutide is a factor that is creating some of that maybe distress and some of that, which is because even Nick, I know he was very open about the retatrutide, yet he had definitely enlarged through the midsection a little bit. So I think even though I think that the benefits of retatrutide are literally incredible, I think that it's still too early to determine if it is a perfect drug or not for it. I mean, semaglutide literally will shut off that emptying process. So I don't think the retatrutide is as bad as semaglutide or trizepatide, but it's still there. I mean, I noticed it instantaneously when, I had a little bit of trouble going to the bathroom and I had some stomach discomfort and some stuff. So I'm wondering, at a higher dose or, whatever, because I was microdosing and I still ended up with it. So at a higher dose, there still has to be some negativity to it. And I think that's going to be something that's going to have to be worked out. It may not be, it could be, something that I'm just theorizing, may not have anything to do with it. But it was surprising to see guys with no stomach issues ever, and all of a sudden some stomach issues. So
It's definitely a theory, because recently I've been thinking of the same thing. Because I had a client, he did a national qualifier about around 3 weeks out. I was like, let's add this in. I took it for 4 months prior. I had some people that I experimented with, and I purposely overdosed on it to see what would happen to me. My stomach was okay. I just didn't sleep for a month because my heart rate was through the roof. But with him, we noticed that he was having trouble keeping his stomach in. And he never really had that issue, especially in prep when he's, peeled.
yeah,
And then it's funny, he did that first regional show. I'm like, all right, let's not add this in. And then going into North Americans, what do you know? He didn't have that issue. That was the only thing different that we did. So then, and even over the past month, I'm like, if it slows things down, because you're hearing about some of these guys keeping it in year round or for most of the year, which I honestly think is a bit crazy. Listen, does it have some great benefits? Yeah, but why would you want to slow things down, especially with an off-season bodybuilder, which, like you said, even though these things can reduce inflammation, if you're slowing things down in the stomach, then food could ferment and you just get a whole other host of issues. So I definitely think that theory is going to be more lean to correct.
everybody's different, because like you said, you didn't really have any issues. Some people may. It just depends. Like some people may be able to use it no issues whatsoever, and it may be just a godsend. And the others may take that instantaneously and have trouble going to the bathroom, start to, kind of slow that down. And it doesn't take long for that to really kind of create some, distress to the stomach and create those problems. And it's again, like, I think it's something that is just not 100% yet. I think it's just, we'll know. And again, I think it's each person just kind of, playing around with the levels and the amounts and what works.
I think something else too, since this was like the first big year where people were using Reta Tide, it's like coaches and athletes having to learn when to take it out.
Yeah.
If you're keeping it too long, the half life is actually pretty long. So your ability to carb up on it. And for me, when I was taking a higher dose, I was just burning through my food. So,
Yeah.
and Don knows that, like when I was eating the highest amount of food, I was just like sweating and burning it right off and everything. So part of it was having to lower it.
Yeah.
And I think also with the slow gastric emptying, me and Don were talking about this. How well are you going? How well are you going to absorb your orals and everything? So
That's the thing that I was considering a big issue, because that absorption rate is going to be changed across the board. It's going to be, as far as like anything that you're taking in over the counter, your oral, everything. And then as far as food, like the absorption of the food and all of that, especially if you're just constantly backing up. It doesn't take long, especially in a bodybuilder. Like you're eating every 2 to 3 hours. If that's not being very efficient and going through your system, all it takes is 1 or 2 meals to get backed up a little bit, and you're screwed for the rest of the day. And then you're playing catch up
ton of people.
Everything. So
I've heard of a ton of people having stomach issues before the Olympia. So
yeah,
there's got to be something in the water, right?
yeah, that's what I said. There's got to be something there. I think it's like I said, it's just a timing thing and kind of figuring out it's new. I think it's going to be one of those things where once everybody kind of figures out what the timing of it, and when to, like you said, when to stop it, when to put it in, when to introduce it, and all that. Yeah, I think it's something that is definitely really promising. I think it's going to be something that is going to be utilized. I think it will. I have seen some positives as far as blood work and those types of things. I've also seen, some really neurological things as far as like using stuff in conjunction with like methylene blue and some of that stuff, but very, very small micro doses of it and stuff. So I think the potential is there. But again, I think we're still new into this. It's hard to say like, yeah, this is 100% what we got to do with it. So, yeah.
Chris, was there anything else you wanted to ask him before we go into some of the Q&A?
Personally,
Well, I know we can
honestly,
sit here and talk to with the way
yeah,
this is going. Well, we could sit here and talk to him for 8 hours if we really want.
no, I know. I'm kind of sitting back. I'm listening. I'm enjoying. There's like questions that come up, and then you already answered them, Chad. So it's kind of working out.
That's good. Then.
Oh, yeah, let's see here. All right, so Chad already answered a bunch of these questions that people answered, but I do want to ask this one that somebody answered. Do you think guys today, this is actually a great question because a lot of people are arguing this today. Do you think guys aren't training as hard these days and that's why the look is so different compared to, let's say, the 90s, early 2000s?
100%. So I think that, again, I think it's time and the way they train. So, when you saw the guys back in the day, Ronnie is a really tough one because, nobody trained like Ronnie. But hell, even Ronnie couldn't sustain the way Ronnie trained. But like people just don't do that. But the flip side of that is it took so much longer to turn pro that whether you wanted to or not, you had to just pound and pound and pound. And whether you wanted it or not, you just built a more dense, mature muscle physique, which you don't really see now. And then the flip side of it is obviously the amounts, like we already, touched on, they're higher now. Now, with that comes other issues, obviously, because you have to put it somewhere. So we're seeing a tremendous amount of scar tissue and, lumps and knots and weird stuff. But really, to me, all the lumps and all that stuff don't look good, but it's the scar tissue that, isn't really synthol. That's just from moving everything around. I get that there's no way out of that, but you didn't have that back in the day. One, you were dealing with cleaner stuff, less scar tissue. You're dealing with not as much higher amount. So again, not as much scar tissue. I think that one of the big issues is training, so you don't end up with that just like gnarly, hard looking, like even when you touched these guys, like, it felt like, just steel. And now, I mean, a lot of the guys, you put your hand on their shoulder and it's like, oh shit, it's like soft and full. And it's just a different era. I don't think it's everybody. I mean, because you can see guys like Hollingshead, like, holy shit, like he's grainy, hard. He trains like, an animal. Like those guys are out there. Nick, like he trains like an animal, but you don't see those guys very often. I mean, you see guys doing very few sets and all the science-based stuff, which, I like a in between, I mean, I think there's science, but I think there's still, grind and, pound. And I think you've got to kind of find an in between for that. But I just don't think it's that, level of suffering and, dedicating to your craft to just go in and train. And then, again, like you can get there so quick. And so a lot of these guys are turning pro, very, very fast. And like, well, I mean, what I'm doing is working, why do I need to change it? I don't need to change it. I'll just keep doing what I'm doing. I can turn pro, and then they get to the pros and they're just gone, they're in and out and they don't have the maturity level and all of this. So I think training wise, I think the food, the suffering, again, like the wanting it so quick, is, probably the biggest issue. Training though, I mean, you just don't see the training that you used to. Like these guys just, and I mean, it's hard to tell somebody they don't train hard because you talk to somebody, every guy trains like an animal, and most guys do train hard. Like, they do train hard, but it's, what are you training? Like, are you training hard for you, or are you training hard for what's considered hard? Like that's the really, key question.
I love that.
We're getting like a coaching master class on here. This is great.
I definitely see an issue. We talked about it like one of our first episodes, with just just people training differently. They're not training as hard. They're trying every way to make it easier, just not the way. When like I was brought up, it was like, how hard can I possibly go? It's just a different thing. And I love it.
And I think that's instilled at a very young age. Like I pounded my kids at a very young age and taught them like certain things as far as like form and just all this little stuff.
Yeah, and they're huge now, Chris. Chad, not to interrupt. Chris, I don't know if you've seen his kids.
No.
I remember when they were little kids. I'm not talking about, oh, they're grown up now. I'm talking huge kids.
They're big.
Like,
like Dom literally legs. We just came back from the gym. I think he threw up 3 times, like just from push. And it's just a different mentality because he was used to that. He's used to training like that. So it doesn't, really affect him. But a lot of people, like we've had people come train with us and they make it halfway through, they're done. And to me, I just can't wrap my head around that because I'm like, this is the only way I know how to do things is all in when it comes to training. And you just have to be able to come in with that mentality. But if you're going in defeating yourself already and I'm going to do this and this, all this pump shit and, half reps and quarter reps and all this kind of stuff, or real slow, meticulous stuff. Like I like slow stuff, but there's a point where it becomes counterproductive. And so I think that's the key. And then, there's a flip side of that. You can be reckless. I look at Ronnie. To me, I couldn't do what Ronnie did, but Ronnie did it. But at the same time, his body couldn't even sustain that. And he was probably the biggest genetic freak we've ever seen. And even he couldn't, sustain that type of poundage over and over and over again. It eventually broke him down. And I think, a lot of people are, they're like, well, I'm not going to do this. I'm not going to do that. But in reality, that's just an excuse. Everybody wants to train hard. It's just how hard can they train? And most people just mentally can't go there. They just can't. And I mean, like, I will say, like, Dom is one of these guys that can vomit and go right back and train. And if he has to vomit again, he'll go vomit and he'll come right back and train. And very few people, like, once they vomited, they're out. They're cashed out. And because we've had athlete after athlete after athlete come through thinking that they could complete the workouts and they just don't ever make it. And even my youngest, like, he trained the same way. Different, I mean, he's going to college now. So he trains a little bit different, than Dom does, but a lot of strength and everything, for sports. But again, like he's able to just go because he started that way. Like that's normal. So, like I remember when he would go and do like football workouts and stuff. And I was like, what are you guys doing? And he'd be like, nothing. We ain't doing anything. It's all that school, football stuff. And so, it's kind of interesting. But I think a lot of people, think they train hard, but I think if they really went somewhere and went through those type of things, which I think they should, I think everybody training wise should, really kind of open their eyes a little bit and mind and change things up because especially if you're at a point where you've trained a certain way for X amount of years and you really haven't progressed, then what does it hurt to change? Like, I mean, if you went heavy, maybe try, more of a high rep hypertrophy style training. If you've done that, more science-based stuff, maybe, try old school. Like, I think there's so many ways to get from point A to point B, but most people are, once they get stuck in that, mindset of doing something, they don't want to, really, change that. Or if they saw, just a little bit of progress and they're really happy with that, I think they, you see guys going up and down because they get to a certain point, then they back off a little bit because they get comfortable, then they go down, and you see these guys constantly in the same spot every single time you see them because they're comfortable. Body is adapted to food, adapted to basically everything. And so, getting out of the comfort zone will help a tremendous amount of athletes.
You just said something again that nobody talks about is that how people adapt to what they're doing. They see a small amount of progress. Oh, it works for me. But people don't realize is that it adapts. I did a lot of my training back in the day with Oscar. Oscar, throughout my teenage years into my early 20s, I talk about him a lot. I credit a lot to him. And listen, we could follow the same exact workouts for 6 7 months, but every single time we are going to break through a new barrier so your body can adapt to what we are doing. We are going to get you stronger, or we're going to find some sort of, maybe it could be drop sets, force, whatever it is, to break through that barrier. So it may be the same movement, but your body is not going to adapt to it. So we are going to progress no matter what cost. And I think it's so great that you said that today because people they get stuck in this. So I'm going to be regimented in planning out my workouts and doing, this week and this that week. But if you're not getting anywhere and the body's adapting to it, it's a complete waste.
And the body, I mean, look, the body is way smarter than all of us. So I mean, it will adapt to everything. It will just create situations where it can make itself through, no matter what the situation. I mean, I look at myself, I lived with, an infection for a year and a half. Like, I think back, I'm like, how the hell did I do that? And the body will just figure out a way. Now, eventually it will just hit a wall and crash. And I mean, everybody's going to do that no matter what the situation. But when it comes to training, you're exactly right. You got to be willing to basically take yourself somewhere and push beyond that point. When you become comfortable in your surrounding, you have failed without a doubt. Once you have become comfortable in that, you realize that you aren't making forward progress anymore. You are just basically maintaining and making things easy for yourself. So, and very few people, I mean, that's why, I mean, most people use a coach. Very few people can really push themselves to that next level because, even whether you want to or not, your brain will basically trick you into doing it. Like you may not think that, but it will. Just like a spouse, it will feel, a little bit of an emotional situation because they'll feel sorry for you. And so when you have a spouse helping you, even though you think they're pushing you hard and they're really cranking down, there's a point where you don't have control over it. You just don't. And, you will back off just enough. Well, he's doing good. His conditioning is good. Let's, do something here, something, maybe an extra rest day, maybe a little extra carbs. It could be anything, but there will be a little bit of an emotional tie to that. And in bodybuilding, there just can't be. Like there just can't be. It has to be a point where you are, using this teamwork as something that is going to get you there, but at the same time, it's business. Like, it's you've been hired for a reason. Like that, athlete expects you to do whatever you can to get them to the best point in their, thing. And I mean, most of these guys don't, they understand that they're going to be pushed. They understand that they're going to suffer. It just depends on, are they willing and able to really suffer, like suffer. And I mean,
Mhm.
like even Ramy, like when I first started training Ramy, and I mean, he's a machine. This guy, everybody told me like, oh, he doesn't diet. He never veers from the diet, like ever. But I remember Dennis James, and again, Dennis James, very close to Ramy, and they, are very close. They were friends. And I remember him calling me going, hey, listen, like, he's literally kneeled down on his bed. He doesn't want to lay down because he feels so bad. He thinks he's going to die in his sleep. And he was kneeled down beside the bed, like, oh shit, what's going on? And I would talk to him, and I'd be like, listen, this is it. Like this is your brain telling you to stop. Don't step on the fucking gas. Like step on the gas. Dennis James put him in the car, drove him around. He fell asleep, brought him back home. Good to go. Next day, went in, had one of the best workouts of the, of the prep. And it's just your brain, hitting a wall because he had pushed, like he had suffered beyond what he had ever suffered before in his life. But he knew that it was going to take him to that next level, and he ended up getting there. So, and it's just what it takes, Can the body do it? Can you mentally do it?
I mean, you again, that's something Oscar used to tell us too. The human nature is, I'm not going to touch that stove. It's hot. I mean,
Yeah.
he used to, if the body's in pain, when most people are not, okay, I'm not just going to keep, it's painful, I'm going to stop. And I think a lot of people, like you just said, it's human nature to put a limiter on yourself. And everybody may think they're training hard or pushing hard enough with the diet or the cardio or think they're in most condition. But human nature is going to be like, no, let me stop. The body needs to protect itself from the brain. And again, nobody talks about that today. It's okay. I'm in pain. I'm pushing too hard. Maybe I have to back off.
Yeah.
Is there times you have to back off? As I don't have to tell you. Yeah, there is times.
Yeah.
But
Listen to the body. There's a point where it's going to tell you, and it may be something you're coming up that like maybe just not healthy or pushing into an injury you're close to them. There's a point where you need to take back step and over evaluate everything and look at it. But most of the time it's just you trying to slow it down and get to a point that you can mentally handle. And the guys that like really step on the gas during that is when they really take the physique to a level that people just, scratch their head at, like, how did you get there? How did you do that? And I think that's one of the, the things. I mean, it's probably one of the most, and I think everybody's got something. Like some people struggle with training, being able to push themselves, in the gym, but can diet, very easy. Other people can train like an animal, but can't diet. Like I was that way. I'll admit it. I could train easy, but I hated to diet. I could eat the shit out of food, but in the off season, but I hated to diet. Where Kim, just the opposite. She did she trained like an animal. She could diet. It didn't matter what she felt like. She'd finish stuff. She'd have tears running down her eyes. Didn't matter. Like she knew she had to do a certain thing. And I'd be like, you okay? Yes, let's go. And I mean, it was just, that was the mentality. Let's go. Let's go. And I mean, it was just never any quit, but it's the ones that get to a point who figure out a way to just make it a little bit easier is the ones that will always miss it just enough to not be satisfied,
So this actually brings up a question and a point too that I was thinking about before and I forgot to bring up. I think that's something else different nowadays too. Is it's like you'll push people to that limit or past the limit they've ever had. They've got the best physique they've ever had, but then it's like they get like PTSD as soon as the show is over, and they like don't want to touch a stairmaster. Like God forbid they stay on a diet. Like it's like they literally have post traumatic stress of dieting or training.
right.
So so that kind of brings up a point. So you always hear these stories about guys really taking time off after their shows. Was that really that common back in the 90s, just taking 2-3 months off? Or is that not really true?
But it depended on the athlete too, because it depended, what you did and what your physique looked like. There was a lot of guys that stayed in shape pretty easy, but honestly, it was those guys really that kind of kept everything, pretty consistent. But guys that really dug deep, like Ronnie always took time off. Usually he would finish the Olympia, and then we would usually take off at least 3 to 4 months. And now when I say 3 to 4 months, I
What does
mean,
that mean, like that?
so,
What does off mean?
so off means off. So I know a lot of people now, off means either maintenance or TRT. We literally wanted the levels to come out of the system. We wanted to get everything out of the system. Now we would get to a point where we didn't want the body, to become catabolic and just eat up everything. So we would, we would monitor those things, and we might do just enough TRT to, keep everything normal, like just normal, but everything else was gone, like everything, even growth. And growth was one of the things that we did on purpose because we wanted the body to actually come down and allow enough time for everything to kind of come out of the system. Any fluid that was being retained in the midsection, any of those things would usually, give a body enough break to at least benefit from it. And then see where everything's at and go into a health phase and do that. Now, not everybody wanted to do that. A lot of people, after the show would want to rebound because obviously you're going to be at a state where you can, add tissue very quickly. So a lot of people would do that. But again, it just depended on the level. You see guys that were maybe not pro, not at the, at that point yet, that would maybe push in on rebounds and stay more consistent and stuff versus the, veterans who was looking at longevity at this point, how they could stay in the game for an extended period of time. And to do that, I don't care what anybody says, they have to take a break. Like they just have to. Yeah. That's where, it's a fine line that we start walking when we're forcing guys to keep competing, especially in this day and age. When we're forcing these guys to do show after show after show to qualify for the Olympia, you have to really, I think this is something they're not looking at when you're looking at it from a promoter standpoint. You're just looking at it from money. And that's what all of them are doing. But you have to look at it from the athlete standpoint also, because to do that, they now have to stay on contest prep stuff for an extended period of time, which is catastrophic. There's no ifs, ands, or buts about it. You stay on those things for extended periods of time. And there's an argument to be made that there was a bundle of guys this year that was probably on it all year. And by the time they got to the Olympia, they had literally been on since the last Olympia. And so those are things that's going to take a toll. Like, I don't care what anybody says, that's going to take a toll. I think, that there should be a lot of things put in place that would help that, not force that. But then at the same time, you need these guys to compete. You need, butts in the seats. So it takes these guys, the big name guys, to do that. And so it's definitely going to shorten their careers if they continue at that pace. Now, again, if they did that for a year and took a break, whatever, for an extended period of time, get their health back on, par, whatever, and then go. But you're not seeing that. You're seeing these guys just one show after another. And next year, they just keep doing more. And again, like, bodybuilding, I get it. It's a short-lived sport. You need to make as much money as you possibly can. I don't know. I'm guessing Derek made plus $1 million this year. So, that's, it's smart when you look at it like that. But again, he has to be very, very smart because you're looking at his physique and you're seeing the toll that it's taking on it versus, if he would have taken a break and done some stuff. So, and he's not the only one. We're seeing it across the board. So, that's going to have to be something that's going to be looked at and addressed eventually.
Chris, did you have any listener questions you wanted to add? Because I have 1,000 questions to ask right now, but I know we're running out of time too.
Yeah, why don't you go first, because my dog's got to go ballistic because there's some dog in the neighborhood screaming.
It's no problem. I keep muting mine because the Shih Tzu downstairs, she wants attention. On that subject, Chad, another people, not really arguing, people are going back and forth on this year, is rebounds. So I think I know what your answer is going to be. Do you believe, for some people, again, not all, depends on the situation, can you put on a good amount of muscle in a rebound? Is it a real thing?
100%. I believe so. I think if it's done correct, it's done short term, I think the body is in a state to add tissue faster than any other point during, during, the year or whatever, because it's in that phase that you've been basically suppressing everything, basically, as far as food and all that. Now you're exploding it, and the body will just come back to where it was. And then usually you're able to, raise that barrier a little bit, that set, I guess, balance point of weight. So I think 100% you can do that. Now, can everybody do it? No, I don't think everybody can do it. I think some people can do it legitimately well if they stay on a very consistent, I guess, scheduled, planned off season. Now, if it's just a free for all where all you're doing is, loading up and just fluctuating water, you're just bloating up and everything, then the rate of probably fat and water versus muscle is probably going to be much greater. You're not going to really notice anything. But the guys that do it the right way, I think, come back very slow, and I think it's very beneficial in a short term, 6 weeks maybe or something. I think it's good, and then go into a moderate health phase to maintain, and then go back into whatever you're going to do. So, but again, everybody is so different. I mean, some guys I would never rebound, just because I know what their body's going to do after the show. So.
Right, yeah, because I made a post a few months ago or so. I was talking about how the rebound is great, and people took it as a general. People take everything general. That's why I try to put disclaimers on things that I say. And so there was some people that were arguing to the death that no, it's fake. Nobody can do it. And then there's some people that say, yeah, everybody can do it. That's why I compete every year. So of course it's a case by case basis. So. Chris, did you want to add a question? Because I have one here that I want to ask him before we pivot.
Yeah, I'm going to go ahead and
this.
I'm going to ask this one because it's a good point. I'll shout him out too. Dominic Latella asks, ask Chad why high protein and the theory behind it, because a lot of people aren't really doing as much protein nowadays.
Why are they doing high protein? I think.
Why did you do high protein back in the day?
Why did I do high protein? So my key was always this. Most people that try to, follow a rule of, I'm going to do, whatever, a gram or whatever per pound, all this kind of stuff. It's almost impossible to figure out where everything's at as far as what your body needs exactly, and stay on top of that and keep leveling it up. So as your body starts to add muscle, if you're, let's say, at 300 grams or whatever, and that's ideal for you and your body maintains that, obviously, if you stay there, the body will just stay there. And so, and I know a lot of people think that the body can't really store protein, but I tell you, I feel like the body can utilize it. It can absolutely store it to an extent, and it can utilize it as needed. However, I think that the body, now within range, I'm not saying like everybody should be using 500 grams of protein, but I think that if you are above where you need, and you're in a building phase doing all of the things that come along with that, your body will handle the protein. Again, being very proactive with the amounts of protein you're taking and the other things that you're taking. I think that the high protein is the best way to do it versus, a moderate, maybe lower protein. I get the theory of the lower protein, the higher carbs, trying to, keep the food amounts at a moderate rate and stuff. My belief has always been high protein. And, I think that the body needs it. I think especially doing the things that bodybuilders do, it has to have it. It just has to. It's what's going to be the building block and the basis behind everything that we are putting in our system.
Chris, and Chad, I want you to correct me if this is like Oscar was big with high protein. Thackeray was big with high protein. I know Milos was big with high protein. Now, it depends on the athlete that I'm working with. Obviously, of how much protein I give them. But when and again, I want you to either agree or disagree and expand on it. If guys are truly training as hard as, we were just talking about before, then yes, they're going to use it. But if you're not training to that capacity, then it's a complete waste. Is that a correct thought process?
100%. 100%. I think there are situations that, depending on the athlete, so and the class or division, I think that there are some divisions that clearly don't need 500 grams of protein. I think that they are going to, not be trying, because bodybuilders shooting for the moon. Like they're shooting for maxing out their skeletal structure to a complete amount. And that's hard to do. And the only way to do it is to feed the body and keep it constantly moving forward. but the body, like we talked earlier, will adapt. And so if we're giving it a certain amount, it will adapt, it will adjust, and it will stay right there. And I think we have to just keep, kind of leveling up to keep the body, kind of moving. And I mean, it's a process. Like I didn't start Ronnie, at 14 ounces of, protein at each meal, but eventually he was, close to 300 pounds on stage. It would be impossible to maintain that amount of muscle just on the things that bodybuilders are doing. It has to be done with food. And really to grow and do what these guys want to do, I think the biggest mistake is these guys are afraid to eat. And even coming into the show, I looked at a bundle of guys at the Olympia. We looked at all of them. Very few guys peaked for the Olympia. Hardly any, really. None of them really had that look of the skin just being pushed against, where the muscle was just popping, and stuff. They just, because you could tell, like they were either trying to push for conditioning, which again, like we've all done that, push for conditioning, or they were just afraid of the stomachs or putting too much food in, afraid they're going to spill over or whatever. But the body has got to be fed. Most of the guys, once they are spot on, it doesn't matter what you do, man. You can feed the body, feed the body, and feed the body. And it just keeps getting crazier and crazier and crazier. If everything is spot on. Now, if you're trying to fix everything at the show, you ain't ever going to achieve what you're trying to achieve anyway. So, I think that's one of the things, but I think definitely food is probably one of the biggest mistakes that everybody messes up. I think depending on if it's too much, not enough, whatever.
Yeah, no, that's definitely well said. So we'll get one more question, Chad, and then we'll let you go, and hopefully have a part two if you'd be open to in the future, because this was this was incredible. So Nate Penn asks, craziest thing you've witnessed in person with Ronnie?
The craziest thing. So this is going to be, this is not really crazy as far as bodybuilding crazy. So he guest hosted for me every year when I had these shows. I had a show in July. So it was right usually before he would start his diet, right? And so I would have him guest host. And this is actually not the crazy. It's just kind of a crazy thing, and I'll tell you another one too. But he came here to guest post, and I had my head of security who was a cop here in town, and he was friends with Ronnie because he'd always drove him around when he was here. And so I called him, and he was taking me back to the hotel, and I said, "Hey, I go take him by, and we have a place there. It's a custard place called Andy's Frozen Custard. It's like crazy good, like it's unbelievable." And I go, take Ronnie by there and get him some custard. And so he puts him on, and he says, yeah, Ronnie said he'd never had custard before. And I'm like, what? And he's like, hey, he doesn't eat ice cream. I'm like, take him and get custard. And so they have this thing called the Ozark Turtle, which is like hot fudge, caramel, like fresh pecans, all this stuff with this custard. Ronnie like literally got this, ate it before they got down the road, and he's like, man, he goes, maybe we can get another one of those? He had to turn back around back into Andy and get it. That was crazy to me because here's a Mr. Olympia that, diets like crazy and had never had custard. Like that was the craziest thing I'd ever seen in my life, as far as that goes. Now, the flip side of that is one of the craziest things was we were prepping for, I want to think, I'm trying to remember. It might have been 03. I'm not 100% sure. It might have been before that. Yeah, I think it was actually before that. And we were trying to basically level him up. And so again, like the body had kind of adapted. We had ran into some issues with, his stomach and stuff when we were trying to put in so much food, we couldn't get enough food in there. And so I started kind of in the off season, changing things around a little bit. And even into the diet where I was like reversing the process where instead of like dropping the carbs down, I was raising it. And so I just kept raising carbs, like gradually pyramiding up over a period of time. And he just kept getting crazier and crazier and crazier. And so I'm like, listen, let's let's see if the body can handle more of this. So we just kept kind of doing that. And I'd never seen anything like it. He had just, I mean, we probably took in 2,000 grams of carbs one day, and he just exploded. And his body just literally took everything in. But the look of that when he had done that, and again, this was like 5 weeks out or 6 weeks out. Again, we were, should be dieting, dropping stuff down, but we're increasing the carbs and stuff. And he just kept getting leaner and leaner and leaner. And we, again, like he would pyramid up into like 15 to 2,000 grams. And then we would, bring him back down to, maybe 500. And then we would pyramid him back up again. And we did this for about maybe 3 weeks. And his body like radically changed like we had never seen it. And that was the year he ended up at like 287 or something. And it was like nutty, like the body, how it responded to the carbs. And that was really the weirdest, craziest thing because we had never done it. We'd never done that. It was completely, off kilter. We just kind of listened to the body. I kind of went with it, how he was looking. I just made adjustments based off of how his body was handling the carbs. We just kept leveling up. And when, I may say, hey, let's bump it 300 grams. And the next day I may, let's bump it again 300. We just kept leveling up. And like the body just kept getting, crazier and crazier. I think that might have been one of the times he did one of those crazy lifts too, I think. I mean, like, because he was like, had put so much carbs in the system and stuff. It might have been when he did the 800-pound deadlift. I'm not sure, but I know it was like, we had done a carb day during that one. So I don't know for sure it was, but we pyramided him up in carbs and his body looked nuts. And so from that point on, we knew we were coming big to 03. Like there was like we were not going to diet, muscle away. It was going to be big or lose. So, and again, like I think that was the craziest, look we'd ever seen because of it.
So I don't know if it's a secret, but like, how did you get 2,000 carbs in? Like, what were the sources? Could you divulge it or no?
Yeah, I mean, obviously, we were doing some insulin and some carb drinks and stuff with it, but I mean, so those meals were probably 300 grams or more at a time, but then there was food on top of that and stuff. So we were definitely, pushing the boundaries,
Right.
things, but I mean, granted, I mean, there was some, carb meals in there, but I mean, most of it was whole foods, potato, grits, stuff like that.
Yeah.
Protein stayed the same that year too. We kept it pretty much 500 grams across the board. Normally I had fluctuated his protein, and this year I didn't. I didn't really fluctuate a lot of his protein. I kept it pretty much stable through the whole time and just fluctuated carbs the whole time. But again, like I said, we reversed it. So instead of like pyramiding way down, we kind of kept him at a base and just pyramided up. And then we would pyramid way up, and then we would, start over, pyramid way up, start over. And I even did an article very similar to what we did. It was called like Creating a Monster or something for Flex magazine and stuff, and written that. And it was kind of going over that process of what we've done.
I'm surprised other guys didn't start doing that because for the longest it was, just pull the food down, pull the food down, pull the food. Over the last few years, now that social media is here and people go on YouTube and they're more transparent, people are now starting to feed up in diets more than
Oh, yeah,
ever.
yeah, yeah.
I mean, obviously, there's some people who have no business doing that,
Oh,
but it's become more common for guys to actually feed up as opposed to the old school way of just pulling down, pulling down, pulling down. So I'm surprised that didn't stick way
yeah.
earlier, especially being Ronnie Coleman doing that,
Yeah.
but it makes sense.
We were pushing because I mean he was known for his conditioning. So when he
Mhm.
came out, that year, his conditioning and his glutes were freaky and everything was. So we were in the mindset of like conditioning, and he was so big that you didn't really have to worry about taking him down. But the first year he was 247 pounds, which most people don't really know that, but he was
Hmm.
247 pounds. Think about who was probably 247 at this year's Olympia, like. I mean, I'm guessing Fitzwater was probably that, I don't know if he was, but I'm guessing he was probably, if not more than 247. But yet Ronnie at that, first Olympia was 247 pounds. And we hit that again at the Arnold that year. And you could tell, like we came down because we were just pushing to see how lean we could get him for the Arnold. But then it was after that show we had trouble because his body. That was the first time he had done 2 shows in a long time, and that was the first year that he really hit a wall, and we had trouble, and we had to really reevaluate. And then the following year, he got beat by Gunther. And then that was the year I said, okay, we got to change what we were doing. And it was tough because we were winning. We had a formula that was working, but then it didn't work. And so we had to regroup. And, the thing that I, really, admire about Ronnie is like, nowadays people would have been like, oh, fucking lost, you're gone. Like, but Ronnie stayed in there, We talked everything out. I said, listen, this is what happened. This is what we know happened, and we went over all of the process and we changed it. And when we changed it, we radically changed it. And then we started seeing how the body responded, and we just kept eating it up and eating it up. Found a formula that worked in 03, bumped that up again in 04, which he was bigger in 04 even than 03, but not as conditioned. But then at that point is when the injuries really took a toll on Ronnie. And so that was, kind of the way it was. But yeah, I mean, I think a lot of back then, I think a lot of it was more watch the body, watch the athlete, just make adjustments as need to be adjusted. Where now I think everybody is like kind of thinking that they have to do it this way, no matter what the body's doing. They just have to do it this way. And I think that's where a lot of people kind of mess up. And again, the nutritionist trying to make the athlete adapt to their style, and versus the nutritionist adapting to the athlete, which I think it's a problem.
And it comes with experience. And
oh, it does for sure. I mean, I'm gonna see, there's gonna be things that I see that I'm gonna pick up on, because I've seen it before, where a lot of these new guys probably are just not going to see it, where I might have. And that again, like a lot of these guys is going to get better and better as they go along. But I think a lot of them is, dealing with that because they don't have the experience right off the bat. They've never dealt with, situations. I know Nick talked about that because I think his coach had not done a 2-day show or something. I mean, those are tricky. Like, if you've never done that, the only way to learn that is to do it. Like, I mean, so there's no guarantee that that's going to go perfect. It's maybe it is, maybe it isn't, but I mean, the only way to do it is to go through the process, get those questions answered and stuff. I mean, even with Ramy, like when I trained him for the first show, the Arnold, I didn't really know what his body was going to do. And his body was so carb sensitive, it just blew up. And, we ended up spilling him over for the Arnold. We learned so much going into that show. We made those adjustments for the Olympia and then, nailed it at the Olympia. But again, like if I wouldn't have went through that and made that mistake, I wouldn't have known, if I would have, because if we wouldn't have done the Arnold and I would have just done the Olympia, I'd have made that same mistake at the Olympia for sure. But, because I mean, my thinking is he's 300 pounds. Every 300-pound guy is going to need a certain amount of carbs, but he just didn't. He was just such a, kind of way he's like such a rapid responder to everything. His body just blew up, So, yeah, I mean, I think that's, a lot of these guys, no matter what they do, they got to go through it. They got to find out. They got to go through it. They got to learn the process, and they'll get better. So,
I agree. Chris, was there anything else you wanted to add before we wrap up?
No, this is an awesome experience. I really enjoyed just listening, and I had questions that got answered without me having to ask, so that's great. And I know the viewers are really in for a treat with this one for sure.
I hope so, man. I hope so. Anytime you guys want to do it again, just let me know.
Yeah, love to have you. This is great.
Yeah, now they are going to go wild over this. So, Chad, before we wrap up, you are currently working with athletes, right?
Yes, absolutely. Matter of fact, I'm still training pros and stuff, but I'm working more with a lot of amateurs, and I really enjoy that now, kind of going back to that, phase and picking things up. I mean, I got a lot of like transformation people that aren't athletes. I have a lot of those now, which I'm sure you probably do too. And then social media guys, like I'm working with a lot of like guys that are trying to break into social media and stuff like that don't have any interest in competing, but that they're wanting to, level up. for their appearance and stuff on social media. So, but again, like I'm training, athletes full time now. Like I'm not doing anything else. Kind of like starting to, kind of put more and more athletes on board. So I'll, continue to do that too.
Where can they contact you if they want to work with you?
They can reach me on my Instagram, the Diet Doc, and I answer all of that personally. So me or Kim, my wife, she gets things taken care of faster than me, but we'll get back to them, and then yeah, we can go from there. But like I said, I'm gonna do more and more of that as I go. When starting back, when I was first coming through the health issues and stuff, I kept the load relatively low until I was 100% sure that I could handle, the full load. And once everything was clear about a year ago, I like dove headfirst again. So yeah, and it's funny because I think everybody gets to a point where they're just not enjoying it anymore. And I was kind of at that point, especially when I was trying to do it with promoting shows and all of this stuff. Like you're running just a million different ways. It wasn't fun for me anymore. Now that's the only thing we're doing is training, clients and stuff again. Seeing the guys like make that progress, especially amateurs, seeing those guys level up and teach these guys, because, look, at the end of the day, I'm not going to be here forever, but I'm trying to pass something along to the athlete that they can use, that they can utilize. And, down the road, they can apply that to whether it be them and train themselves, or take that stuff that they've learned from me and maybe apply it, down the road. So I always try to stay very, and this too, I try to explain everything we were doing, like when we were doing it. I was like, this is why we're doing this. So, it's one of the things that I always do with everybody. So.
Yeah, no, that you did do. All off season, all prep, you were any questions I had, and even when I didn't ask any questions, you still explained things. So for everybody watching, thank you for listening to the end, Chad. Thank you again for coming on. We're definitely going to have you on again, because this was, aside from the viewers liking us, even, and I'm sure I could speak for Chris, this was freaking awesome. So for everybody that's watching, if you do want to work with Chad or want the opportunity to work with Chad, contact him on his Instagram. I highly recommend him. Like I said, he turned me pro. I have nothing bad to say whatsoever about the experience that I had with him. And as you can see from everything that you've heard today, he has more experience than pretty much anybody in the industry. So until next time, please like, subscribe, share, and then we'll catch you guys next time.
Absolutely. And I'm going to put his Instagram in the description, guys, so you can find him easily.
Yeah, I appreciate you. I love it, and I need to do more of these. I kind of go in spurts, but I'm kind of a private person. I don't get out there and really do much, but I'm trying, the boys and Kim are constantly like, you gotta do more, you gotta do more, you gotta do more. And so I'm trying to, do that. I would be satisfied just staying home and in the back and in the background and stuff. So we'll see. So I appreciate
it.
Yeah.
We will definitely have more to come. So
awesome, guys.
All right, guys.
All right. Thank you.